This is our unconstitutional awakening program.
Liftoff will start in T-minus 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have ignition.
Brought to you by Pt.3, consultant we designed.
Ahoy there, mateys. It's time to set sail on another episode of Unconstitutional Awakening, the podcast. Today, on this Sunday, of course, we're working on part 3 of A Sea of Thieves, which, if you guys have been keeping up, we covered ancient pirates the first week, and we did Asian pirates, piracy in that area, on the second week, and now we're getting into what is considered the Golden Age. And I'm not sure if many of you know, but the Golden Age was actually divided into 3 different periods, lasting approximately from 1650 to 1730. So, there's a little bit of a timeline lapse and stuff in here. A lot of people, when they first hear the Golden Age of piracy, their brain immediately goes to Blackbeard, but he was actually more towards the end. As the first forms of the first area of the Golden Age of piracy was from about 1650 to 1680, which took place after the 30-Year War. There's quite a bit to get into there, of course, but we're this week I've got Bandit and Ox with me on this chapter of it, and as we've been discussing outside of the show, me and Bandit think that the Golden Age is going to take more than one episode. So we're just going to see where this first part of it goes, and obviously plan on coming back for even more. So you guys buckle in and get ready as we take this deep dive into history. Of course, we appreciate everybody out there listening and watching and keeping us going and such. It's greatly appreciated. I do pay attention to all the views and the love that we're getting and stuff. I've seen you folks over there on Rumble and BitChute giving me tons of love for these past couple episodes of the Sea of Thieves. So, I hope it continues. But one of the best ways you guys can help us out is giving us a little support by hopping on over there to unconstitutionalawakening.com, where you can not only find the show and links to get to the show, even listen to the show while you're there. You can also check out things like our awesome merch store, where you can get you some sweet Unconstitutional Awakening merch. And you can even take a gander at all our sponsors we got going over there. Like my buddy Kirk Elliott over there, kirkelliott@Pt.3 / hooking people up with gold and silver and, other places to invest your money that you wouldn't really think of to maybe make a buck or two before Lord knows what happens with the economy. And Kirk's a good guy, man. He's like all of our show sponsors. These are Friends of Liberty that are offering alternatives to the current situation that we have, and that's the kind of thing we need, is people building a different infrastructure. So you guys get on over there and check out Kirk for that. You can also check out Peachy Key Creations, our local energy healer, soap maker, and candle maker, and she's currently got the Dragon's Blood Pirate Soap, which is kind of a special for this show, man. You guys go on over there and check out Peachy Key Creations. She's on Facebook and Etsy, and she'll get you taken care of. And my little buddy over there at Ammo Can Survival, making camping, first aid, and survival stuff, as well as ghillie suits right here, and all these different kinds of plate carriers. And man, he's got all kinds of good stuff going on. You guys make sure you get over there and give him some love and see what he can do to help you guys out, man. He's got all kinds of great stuff going on for survival needs and protection needs and stuff like that, man. And that's Ammo Can Survival. He's over there on Instagram. And of course, my good buddy Brett Pike over there with classicallearner.com doing the Cubs to Bears books and Homeschools Connected, man. He's helping all these people that have walked away from the indoctrination camps and is making a private homeschool community, man. And you can get all kinds of curriculums and stuff that you can just reference back to when you're trying to teach things for your kids. Hey, he's even got recently a design for building a sailboat, which would come in super handy with us pirates. So you guys can find all the links to those guys over there at unconstitutionalawakening.com and even on each one of these episodes, because I make sure that I hook you guys up with that kind of stuff. So, as I was saying before I jumped into all that good stuff, the early days of the rise of the golden age of piracy took place about 1650. That 30-year war ended in 1648, and there was a big influx of Caribbean buccaneers. You had a mixture of coalitions of the English and the French and the Dutch all around Jamaica, Tortuga, and even in parts of Mexico, who would even go into these places and hunt things, for food and stuff like that, and establish their area. And most of them were united by their hatred for the Spanish and their desire for Spanish gold. So a lot of these guys would partner up with the Caribbean Indians of the time and would find ways to carry on their piracy. And there was many factors that contributed to this golden age of piracy, from it being, taking valuable cargo, not really like gold and such as much as supplies for their ships to continue with what they're doing, food and drink and stuff like that to stay alive. And it's one of everybody's favorite eras. Like when you get to reference into things like Treasure Island and Pirates of the Caribbean and stuff, all of that kind of takes place during the golden age of piracy. There's most of your famous pirates come out of there, from Anne Bonny to Blackbeard and stuff. And as Ox made sure to mention before we even got started today, a lot of people don't realize that a lot of those pirates didn't actually cross paths as much as people would think they would, because you've got some of them going on in these early parts, like in the 1680s and stuff like that. And then you don't even see like Blackbeard appear on the scene until after the 1700s, even though he was probably doing things.
It's not just like the time difference. It's think about how absolutely massive the ocean is.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Well,
even just the Atlantic, even just the Gulf of Mexico. Mm-hmm. Think about it. And it took you months to sail. Yes. So these when they romanticize stuff in Hollywood about pirates crossing, not as much as you think. Because, if you've got, 20 ships, and if you've got 5 ships, 10 ships, you could sail within 2 miles of each other and not see each other. Yes. And you couldn't just hail another ship,
No, it wasn't that easy.
It's like they didn't cross paths as much as people think. Not just that, it's like they operated, years apart, probably.
Well, and people think that when they're first thought, they think of like criminals and people that were just out there stealing stuff, but they don't realize that a lot of these early pirates were actually privateers for like the royal powers at the time.
When they were well educated too.
Yep. The Crown
very
licensed,
well educated.
Sir Francis Drake. The Crown licensed Sir Francis Drake and Sir John Hawkins, and others like him as privateers to prey upon Spanish vessels.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
They were privateers.
Well, because everybody was kind of against what the Spanish was doing at the time. At the end of that 30-year war and like to that, the Spanish was just ruthless.
They wanted that Spanish gold too, man.
Oh yeah.
And like Jimmy said, it's not just gold that they were after. The spice trade at that time was just as popular as gold.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of those things, exotic spices.
Well, at the time, like a lot of the New World was originally divided between Spain and Portugal. and especially a lot of the coasts off of like South America and Central America and stuff. And a lot of these groups from Europe and France and such like that were quick to hire sailors to attack and seize these ships. And most of like excuse me, like I was just saying, most of them were after these Spanish ships and their gold or their supplies. And it was actually, you know, during the time the privateers regularly attacked the Spanish ports, Anglo-French sailors came to be known as buccaneers, which that was that's kind of what people think of when you think of a pirate as a buccaneer. And like they made their homes in the islands of like Tortuga and Jamaica and all in that Caribbean type area because it was a great kind of port and in and out and an area for them to like hide and stuff like that. Because I mean, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Caribbean, but your first thought is like the Bahamas or maybe Cuba and stuff like that. But there are tons and tons
Bring
of
up
little
a
islands.
bring up a map of the Caribbean islands and just give people a reference of like exactly how many tiny little islands that pirates could call like home and just hide for any amount of time.
Well, and let's talk about Nassau or Nassau, however you want to pronounce it. That was like a pirate stronghold for a long time. I mean, it was governed by pirates for pirates.
I mean, this is a bit of a small image. I'll try
Yeah,
to pull it up a little bit bigger, but I mean, if you look at all of these, just
Yeah,
all of
perfect.
these
crazy.
islands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like you figure you've got not only do you got pirates hanging out in all of these little bitty islands and even ones
Mhm.
that you can't probably see on this map, but you've got them all up in these coasts and stuff, which at the time, like the coasts of Florida, the coasts of Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, all of this, Venezuela and such, that was all very Spanish run areas. And so I mean, what better place to set up shop if you're trying to stop them than inside of all these islands that they're regularly traveling back and forth in to bring supplies and slaves and Lord knows what else back and forth in that area at the time. And a lot of these guys got the knack for being like criminals or whatever because they were going against the Spanish. But in reality, it started more as that, like I was saying a few minutes ago, them hiring people to do the royals and such at the time, hiring people to do their bidding, and in a sense of like an alternative navy because let's face it, their navies were their navies were getting crushed by Spain and Portugal because they were the superpower of the time. Like, of that time frame, they were your America or your Europe or your Russia even right now. Like they were a big superpower out there basically taking over different parts of the world.
And think about what you just said also. Like, people don't take into account that they were a huge chunk of trade. Like, they weren't just out there, like, pillaging, taking, and sinking other ships. They were transporting cargo to and from ports
It
in
was worth money.
large quantities, you know,
Very large.
large quantities.
Well, you had made mention of Francis Drake a moment ago, and
Yeah.
he didn't really have any real authority to plunder Spanish towns and stuff, but when it came to being out on the sea, you had you they got the a lot of these places got involved in the widespread development of privateers and pirates.
Mm.
And they were sometimes accumulating armies together to lay siege to these Spanish cities in the New World, or and you you would just have you'd have a group of say European privateers meeting up with a group of pirates that were already out there working that were definitely a mixed group of people, like that. To clarify, people don't realize this, but a lot of your pirates were, they weren't just like white dudes or black dudes or even Spanish dudes. There was a big mixture of people that had
Yeah.
either like walked away from the actual privateer stuff or walked away from the actual Royal Navy and stuff like that.
A lot of Royal Navy or ex-Royal Navy.
Yeah, and they would join up with these other groups and stuff like that to make their forces even stronger. Like there's just so many people that have actually been like lost to history that you don't even realize, because again, like we mentioned in the last episode, your average lifespan as a pirate was maybe 2 years, because there was no telling what you were going to come across and have to deal with in that time. So you've got people that were out there plundering these ships in the Caribbean, mostly in the Atlantic coast, but it also went into the coast of like Africa and the Indian Ocean, and the Asian pirates were still pretty prominent this time too, in like the South China Sea. So I mean, aside from legends like Blackbeard and Bartholomew Roberts, there were countless victims in the late 1600s that were kind of the inspiration to some of these later pirates like Blackbeard and such. And people like Woodes Rogers, who was the governor of the Bahamas at the time, were most responsible for suppressing piracy, because anytime they would actually capture any of these pirates, it was an immediate to the
They'd hang them.
gallows.
They'd hang them.
Immediate, like without question. You were guilty of piracy, you get hung.
Let's talk about Jack Rackham for a little bit. What information do you have on him? Because, guys, if you don't know about Jack Rackham, who was kind of one of the founding fathers, so to speak, of the golden age of piracy, this was a salty hombre, like a really bad dude. So let's pull up a little info on Jack Rackham. He's nuts.
Calico Jack was he was kind of in that mid frame. Like he was right there towards the end of the 1600s, but the beginning of the 1700s. And
he created the skull and crossbones.
Jolly Roger.
He was an English pirate captain operating in the Bahamas and in the Cuban area and stuff. And yes, he did. He is who you can credit to the early Jolly Roger flag. Like I had a picture of it. I'm trying to see if I can pull it back up, because I know it's in this mix of things that I got. And that early Jolly Roger flag doesn't actually look like the skull and crossbones that we're used to, actually. The early Jolly Roger flag, and I don't know why it's not. There it is. The early Jolly Roger flag looked kind of more like this.
The skeleton with the heart, right?
The skeleton with the heart.
Yeah.
And this was what you noticed. This is what you've seen for pirates and stuff like that. I mean, because sure, there was many different flags flown throughout the time, but this was the one that Calico Jack made. And he was pretty ruthless in his own stories and stuff like that. And his nickname was actually derived from the calico clothing that he chose to wear. And he would come across a lot of different folks, and little's known about his early upbringing, but like the first record of him as a quartermaster on Charles Vane's Ranger wasn't until 1718, operating out of the New Province Islands of the Bahamas. And that at that time, that area was kind of known as the Pirates Republic, which gets into some funny things, because you can credit a lot of modern democracy actually to piracy, because they did, again, pirates really didn't believe.
Can we go back for one thing?
Yeah.
You actually brought up a picture of Blackbeard's pirate flag. That was Blackbeard's.
That was, according to what I've got in front of me, that's
spearing the heart. That was Blackbeard's.
According to what I've got, this says it's Calico Jack.
Hold on, once.
He went to his grandparents. He'll be back tomorrow. I don't know.
As it said, although pirates flew flags before this time, the Jolly Roger we know belonged to the pirates of this age. They favored the sloops and kitchens to hunt their prey, while New Providence in the Bahamas provided a safe haven for their time.
Yeah, I know that Nassau, I guess, was viewed as the capital of the Pirates Republic, and Calico Jack was definitely a prominent pirate at that time. But let's talk about how short his some would call it reign of terror, some would call it career, some would call it a lot of things. But what was that time frame like? Because if I'm not wrong, he actually lived longer than the life expectancy of a pirate, and it was like 4 or 5 years that he was actually out sailing, and then he was hung, if I'm correct, in Jamaica.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was like prior to some of your other ones like this. He's kind of a guy that's looked over a good little bit, but he was out there doing on these boats and doing things up into like the 1720s and such. Like
Well, and he was not big on the Spanish gold either. He was more about, the product that a lot of these trade ships were carrying.
that is absolutely correct, and he is one of the few that did run across some of the other ones. Like
Yeah.
there is stories of him coming across Anne Bonny, and
Now she was one that lived. She just disappeared into like wherever. She just disappeared out of the limelight. Anne Bonny did, and there is speculation that she was the one that actually lived the longest into retirement, which is like. And they say she lived to be in her 80s, which is unheard of. Like
Especially for that time period.
Well, it wasn't unheard of, but just in that a hard life at sea.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Doing,
There's no health, anything that you can really take. There's no published common knowledge, health and medicine that you would have. I mean, there's wisdom out there. Don't get me wrong. But I'm saying there's no health trends or anything for people to follow. It had a lot more to do with genetics, I think, at the time as well.
Yes, and like you really got to take in. I mean, what do we know? I mean, it's like.
Well, we know nothing, and I think that's all we really know for sure.
Food and what you drank and what you ingested was 1,000 times different than what we've got going into ourselves now. I
100%.
mean, everything natural. So longevity wasn't as bad as people thought it was.
No,
the reason mortality rates were so high then was because people took into account infant mortality. Like you had 10 babies and 6 died. That's what they take into account when they take the average life expectancy.
Sure.
Good to know.
Sure.
But yeah, well, no, seriously, Ox, you need to take a look at that sometime. Like when they do like the average life expectancy back then, what they take into account for.
Check that out.
It was normal 50, 60 years old, which, looking at how our life expectancy is declining right now, isn't much of a difference. But to be 80 years old and retire as a pirate is absolutely like unheard of.
The amount of net worth that you have to amass to retire from piracy, because she didn't do it when she was old. She's not some 60-year-old lady doing this. She amassed a considerable amount of wealth in order to retire and live comfortably for 80 or whatever years.
And I think she disappeared to an island, if I'm not mistaken. I think Anne Bonny disappeared to an island.
Well, and then to backtrack just a tad, like when because we're still in like the late. 60s.
I got way off.
We got a long way to go.
We're good. Piracy and these buccaneers being hired by these other countries was considered a legal act, but after a lot of affairs that led to murders and different shady things kind of going on, piracy itself became illegal around 1673. And then the English followed in 1680, and even the French eventually halted their legal piracy in 1697. And like during these times in the late 17th century or early 18th century, a lot of things were happening in the Indian Ocean and the Red Sea, and they were targeting ships that were often full of merchant goods, like you mentioned a minute ago, Ox, like spices and gold and tobacco, even opium, thanks to the
Very
Asian
popular.
piracy travel and a lot of that. And this gets into kind of mention of Captain Kidd, who
Yes.
who took his travels into the Indian Ocean and off the islands of Madagascar.
Yep.
And he turned that island into a stronghold, which his ship, the Adventure Galley, stayed on harbor and not sailing for the longest time. And this was like a 300-ton ship with 34 cannons aboard and easily 150 men at any given time. And also in this kind of time frame, you had Henry Every, Thomas Lew, Lawrence de Goff, and like these were very powerful pirates of this time frame that that you don't really hear a lot of. People kind of look these ones over. They're just not I guess household names like some of the other ones are.
They didn't have the limelight.
It was around early 1700s where piracy really became illegal. And I think it started around 1730. 1716.
It was kind of the climax of that of the because the golden age is technically broke into 3 different segments.
Yeah.
And at the end of the first segment of the golden age, between the 1690s and 1716 is when this climax happened.
Okay.
And a lot of these earlier guys like Captain Kidd that I just mentioned and stuff.
Because I'm looking at here and it says the governor of Bahamas called the guy's name was Woodes Rogers.
Yep.
He was the one that was the most responsible for starting to suppress piracy.
Yes.
And he wanted to bring order to the Caribbean Sea. And that's when the whole, like, if you were branded a pirate, they were going to hang you. Or if you were caught, if you were arrested for piracy, or, if you were caught as a pirate, automatic death sentence. That's when they first started. I guess they don't, governments don't like private, people getting too powerful like that and making too much money. So they're like, oh, we got to do away with this. Make it illegal.
Please kill them.
Does that sound familiar? What governments tend to do, when private citizens, when they look at something and go, we need to take that over. Only the government can be a pirate.
It's too profitable.
It's too profitable for regular citizens to be that, to do stuff like that. Sounds familiar.
God.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean the question remains why piracy flourished so well in this particular period.
Yeah.
And there were men and women of all, it was bad luck to have a woman on the ship, but there was still, like, in these islands and stuff, they did tend to keep female pirates and stuff to, tend to things while they were gone.
Mm-hmm. Well, pirates lived by, there was still the whole, but pirates lived by a different set of sea rules, If they elected a female pirate captain, that was it. That's, you went by that. It's like, I think they followed a different set of sea rules than, regular seagoers. I don't have the, I've got it somewhere. There's a list of, I don't want to call it a code, but there was rules at sea for pirates. Especially the black flag and the red, flying the black flag and flying the red flag.
That was okay. So there.
Yeah, there you go.
Early forms of piracy, they were a lot of their weapons. The first weapon a pirate was to use would be terror, and you either flew that Jolly Roger flag or that red flag, and
or the regular black flag. There is a big difference between a straight black flag and a straight red flag.
Yes.
There's a big difference.
Oh yes. And these were kind of the warning to these merchant vessels that these were the pirates approaching them and stuff. And and just think about that. If you're out at sea, and you're just a regular old dude out at sea trying to travel some merchant stuff, and you see that flag from another ship from far distance, immediately you're in fear, you're in terror, you know what I mean? And so, that psychological aspect not only was Blackbeard known for it greatly, but like that psychological aspect kind of carried throughout piracy because people would see that flag or any of them and they'd be like, oh fuck, it's time to batten down the hatches and get things taken care of because we're about to be under attack. Like the psychological effects of the warfare themselves.
It's funny. Blackbeard was actually arguably the best documented pirate at using fear as a tactic because he was not
for real though.
He was not known to actually be a violent man. He was only documented to have killed an opponent in the battle that he himself was captured in and then killed.
It was the thing was it was the difference between the black and the red flag. The black flag was no quarter. Was it? Wait a minute. Hold on. I don't want to quote this wrong because there is a big difference. Let me look this up real quick because they actually would show you quarter if you voluntarily like surrendered your goods. If you lowered your if you struck your colors and said, "Hey, man, this is insured," just go
this
ahead.
Is not worth our lives.
This is not worth our lives. The red flag
was a warning sign for no mercy. The skull and bones was death. The bleeding heart was slow and painful death awaits you. The red skeleton was torment with eventual death.
Well, I think they would fly. Wouldn't they fly their regular colors, but also with a black flag or a red flag? A plain black flag or a plain red flag. One was like, if you don't surrender, if you do surrender, we'll, show you mercy. And then I think the red flag, if they flew the red flag with their actual colors,
they're going to kill you all.
They're going to kill you all no matter what.
Yeah.
And of course I don't
want to
share this link or whatever.
Don't.
What I've got here though is that, as I'm trying to read through them too, is that the hourglass symbol is time is running thin. The nude pirate was pirates with no shame. Clothed pirate most likely stood for pirate captain.
I've never seen these. Okay.
The lifted drinking glass was a toast or dying to Satan. The horn skeleton was Satan, and weapons was incoming fight. And like
I know what they're talking about with this. They're talking about like the symbolic meanings behind the actual pirate colors. Like if certain flags here, like the Jolly Roger, but they would also fly a plain black flag or a plain red flag with their actual pirate colors. That's what I'm talking about. Okay.
To indicate their intentions after they actually get contact.
Yes, that's what that. Yes. Hold on. Let me.
No, you're fine.
Yeah.
And I mean, but there when you do just a general search of pirate flags, you'll see that there's a ton of different ones because pirates would use the red flags. They'd even use flags that were covered in blood already as kind of a warning sign too. You know what I mean?
So like a maroonish brown flag after a while.
Yeah. And that was some of the first stages of their mental attack. You know what I'm saying?
Warfare.
Because again, that's the first thing you would see off of another ship if you were out lost at sea and you happen to see another ship. Your first thought is, oh yay, another ship. Your second thought is, oh fuck.
Okay, so the different colors flown with the flag. If they flew a black flag, it meant quarter would be given if the enemy surrendered, meaning they'll spare your life after going through your cargo. If it was red, though, that means there was no quarter given whatsoever. They're going to kill you no matter what. So, okay. All right. So that just like, they had like, man, I don't want to say morals. They had rules. They had a code that they would follow. They weren't just like.
I think it's interesting to see how they operated within that code. I mean, Casey, for example. Sorry, Bandit. If we can edit that, please, Jimmy. But I think it's pretty interesting. A lot of these pirates would operate within that code and use fear as their first tactic because, as you know, Bandit, when your enemy is afraid, they make mistakes, and they make a lot of them. And when you make mistakes, you crumble from within.
Yep. And if you can go in without firing a shot, you just spared your crew and got, took their cargo.
Right.
That's a win-win.
I mean, it's always ideal to win without having to fire a shot. And if your crew was never in any real danger, but your name is still the most feared in that region because there is that threat of force that's levied against everybody you encounter, that could just be enough. I mean, if you've got the might and you just outnumber guys, that usually was enough in that time period.
Well, okay. Around 1655 is when the English captured Jamaica from Spain, and so these early English governors of the Jamaica area were freely granted letters of marque to Tortuga, and even their own countrymen. While the growth of Port Royal provided these raiders with more profitable and enjoyable place to sell their stuff, because they would capture this stuff from these other boats, and sure, they would keep some of it, but they would also, at the time before piracy was illegal, they were bringing it back to these governors in these areas like Jamaica and Tortuga and these other islands and stuff that we've kind of discussed here over the past few moments when I showed that map a little bit ago, and they would sell it back to these governors as a form to make money and such.
Damn, man.
They were ruthless.
That's like getting punked.
It is. Like they would be sent. They would be hired on to go do this, and then they would turn around and they'd be like, "Well, if you want it, you got to pay us for it."
And also at the same time, I can imagine political rivals hiring pirates to do this to their rivals. Go capture these goods and then sell it back to them at an inflated price and cut me in for a part. I mean, you could almost imagine
that is how the governing body worked in the Pirate Republic.
Yeah,
a lot of extortion took place.
You can only imagine that a form of that takes place now.
Sure. Oh, sure, absolutely.
It's a Russian game, man. The rules change as you go.
Okay, and can total side note though. Speaking of being romanticized by Hollywood, if anybody ever wants to take a really good look at a good show about pirates during the Golden Age, it would be the HBO special Black Sails.
So I actually talked with Jimmy about this a little bit earlier, and Black Sails depicts these pirates as they were, but unfortunately, it has a lot of them overlapping and intersecting in terms of like time periods, which was not accurate.
And they totally fucked up Blackbeard. Yeah,
they really
well, his death, but as a character, they did pretty good. But they fucked up his death.
Now that's not. It is true, but they also did keelhaul his ass. They really did.
Yeah.
And then they beheaded him, and then put his head on the front of the boat the entire trip back.
Yeah, but he was killed in battle, though.
Yes, he was.
Yeah, he wasn't keelhauled to death. He was killed in battle.
Yes, they keelhauled him after he was good and dead.
Yep. But it does a pretty good job of like depicting the violence of of being a pirate. That was
was ruthless.
Yep. It's a good show. It's totally worth the watch.
Well, you're talking about like the back and forth, and most of these guys were teaming up against the Spanish, but while you had that going on, you did have the Dutch colonies hiring different kinds of pirates. You did have the English colonies hiring different kinds of pirates. You even had the French. You even had the French pirates. The French hiring different kinds of buccaneers, because again, back in this early stage of the Golden Age, they were considered just buccaneers. But like not only would they come together to fight the Spanish, but they would double cross each other in a heartbeat.
Oh yeah, to ruthlessly.
Yes, like these Dutch pirates would, after they helped the French pirates take out a Spanish ship, they might be like, we're gonna take you out because we want all of what we just got off that ship. Like,
yeah, they have it on their ship already.
Yeah, it wasn't uncommon for them to attack each other after something was done.
I want what you have goes both ways,
Yes.
Well, and I think the use of guerrilla tactics by pirates were some of the most creative and fascinating methods that they did use a lot of times. Men would dress as women and appear to be like passenger boats and would be approached by other boats or approach other boats. And look,
Spring a trap.
from 50 yards away, I might maybe be able to dress and look something like a woman, maybe. But
No,
up
dude,
close,
sorry.
up-
A
yeah.
babushka, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. But, broad-shouldered, thick-necked babushka. But like, I'm just saying, from a distance, you're not going to be able to change the ship's trajectory quickly enough to be able to stop them from getting up to you. So when you look with a telescope and you go, "That's a woman," whatever. They approach you, no big deal.
Well,
It's already too late.
This goes into one of the towards the end of the Buccaneer era, and one of the most famous, I guess, privateer versus pirates versus Spanish and stuff thing that happened was the raid on Charlestown in 1684, which was big because that was a Spanish controlled area at the time, and you not only had pirates of many different backgrounds coming in, but you had boats carrying over 200 men, of multiple boats carrying over 200 men each, going in to attack the raid on Charlestown or the Spanish raid on New Providence and stuff. And like that was a big ass battle. And it was later renamed Nassau or Nassau.
Yeah, Nassau.
Yeah,
Nassau.
And but that battle in itself was an extremely laid out bloody battle that had the casualties and losses. There were 4 ships completely destroyed, 1 ship taken, and over there's the minimum, because it's actually unknown, 700 prisoners just from that one raid.
Wow.
And they were not, they weren't hesitant either. It's guesstimated that it was 200 or so that were women and children, and 200 or so that were just slaves at the time, kind of captured in this subject. And Lord knows what happened to the women, but a lot of the children and even the slaves were kind of just taken in and became members of these crews and stuff to further on the piracy later down the road and such like that. I definitely recommend checking into that battle, because there's a lot of interesting things during that raid that happened like that. It kind of set the forefront and ended up leading to the end of buccaneering in the 1690s.
Guys, I hate to do this, but I actually got to cut out right now. I'm really sorry. I got some stuff going on.
You're good.
I think we could. We're almost at the end of
We're at the end of, I think, this part of it.
Okay.
Which is consisting of the Buccaneer period, because as I was saying, in the 1690s, the old buccaneering ways began to die out as the European governments began to discard the policy of no peace between the line. And buccaneers were hard to control, and some even embroiled their colonies in unwanted wars, and notably at the 1697 joint French buccaneer of the siege of Cartagena. And it wasn't long that after this that the Dutch and the Europeans that were kind of taking over the colonies at the time were like, okay, we've got to quit. We've got to cut out this piracy thing, this legal piracy thing. And that's when they started branding it as piracy. As piracy, exactly. And that branding them as criminals and such like that. And, it's good to note that it was after this that piracy itself became the time when you were getting like the hanging for just being a part of it. So, I think this is a good place to end on the buccaneering, because like I said, about the end of the 1690s, getting close to the 1700s, is when it actually transfers to another subsection of what piracy was.
The real piracy.
Oh yeah. Well, because it's considered the pirate round, which started in 1693 and lasted till 1700s, and I think that's where we're going to pick up next week, because there were a lot of Anglo-American pirates starting to come into
A lot out of the Carolinas.
Yes, yes, and
Mhm.
that's when a lot of things start getting even more, lit and kind of crazy, and you get into these great stories like and Bobby and Blackbeard and stuff because they come after this.
Oh yeah, we'll be able to
So,
mention all of the most popular names.
oh,
Oh
absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
So,
We'll name drop.
oh,
Oh,
definitely. So, so at the end of this buccaneering period, a lot of your pirates went into hiding and scattered and went into different places, and it kind of it was kind of under secrecy from the end of that raid that I was just talking about until the early 1700s. So, of course, you guys know I will have all of these fantastic links and more that we've shared on the show today and stuff like that, so that you guys can do a little bit of extra digging around yourself in lieu of getting ready for part 4 of this Sea of Thieves deep dive into pirates. So, I do appreciate Bandit and Ox joining me today on this section of it. I think we covered some good stuff and laid a good foundation for where we're going to continue into piracy, you guys, because we're just a bunch of good old freedom pirates, and Captain Conspiracy is trying to lead you down to the ship and set you free in different ways. So, you guys make sure you check out all those links and make sure you check out all our good stuff over there at unconstitutionalawakening.com. And until next week on the Sea of Thieves, we'll see you next time. But before I do sign out, you guys know I gotta leave it with one good thing. You guys know how I love to do these.
I'm ready.
So, oh crap, I lost it. So
no, you got to pull it back up. You can't. Yeah,
no,
you
no,
can't.
no. I got it pulled up. So, what is a pirate's favorite doll?
Hmm.
A Barbie. You guys have a great night. Thank you.